Welcome back. This is Woodturning 201, Basic Bowl Turning. And in this short series, we're going to go through two very simple, very basic bowls. First one is going to be pretty much like this, just a very simple bowl, no foot, but one sort of mounting, one use of the chuck. And in the next bowl I'm going to turn, which will be in the next video, I'm going to use a different kind of tenoning system, and we're going to do a little bit of different shape. So you get a chance to go through this twice. So this is dry wood. I'm lucky to have some blanks that have already been pre-turned and reshaped, but not all blanks are going to be like this. But nevertheless, the most stable kind of mounting we can do is what we're going to do here, and that is with a faceplate. So the first thing we did is take our drill and drill appropriately deep holes so that we can mount this with the right kind of screws. And I want to show you these screws. These are hex head self-drilling sheet metal screws. I don't want to use anything less strong. In certain woods, the wood's not quite as hard as this. So this tip will actually drill the hole for itself. So in this case, we don't want to count on that, so we pre-drilled them, and now we're just going to set the drills in the holes. Sorry about that kind of noise, but this is a secure way of fastening these. Line up my holes and put the rest of the bits in. So bits are mounted, faceplate is mounted, and we're ready to go on to the lathe and make the first turning. Now I have my safety glasses, that's for sure. But in addition to my safety glasses, I'm going to be wearing a full face shield, because in bowl turning, the pieces that can go flying are larger, they can go farther, they can hurt more. So I'm not kicking off little flakes, but I now could have flying pieces of wood. So in bowl turning, it's always safer to wear a full face shield. I choose to wear my safety glasses and my face shield. One protects me from impacts, the other one protects my eyes from the smaller flying debris from dust and things like that. So we're going to go to the lathe. I'm going to screw this faceplate on, bring up my tailstock for support, and then talk to you about the tools and techniques that we're going to use to turn this first bowl. See you at the lathe. Okay, we're at the lathe. I've screwed the blank onto the headstock, and I want to show you the gouge I'm going to be using. This is a bowl gouge, a deep fluted gouge, and it has a swept back bevel, approximately 40 degrees or so. And I'm going to use that to both round out the blank, face off the blank first. So my goal is to be sure that we are slightly above center line. Now, here is the rule that we need to follow. Rule of 45s. Handle is down at an angle of 45. The blade is rolled to 45 degrees. 0 or 90, 0 the other thing, but right halfway in between, right about there. Handle's down. Flute is rolled 45. And for the first cuts, the tool rest is set at 45. So this is on my hip. My hand is holding it on the lathe. Either way, doesn't matter. And what I'm going to do is make a few very small cuts here. I want to be sure this is running true. Let's just test that with the speed willy loaf real quickly. And as you can see, it's not perfectly straight on the faceplate, so I need to square this edge off first. If I go in like this, I'm going to have a problem. The problem is the grain of the wood is going, let's get it perfectly lined up like this. So as I come into this cut, these fibers will cut fine. But as I come out of the end grain, these fibers in this end will want to tear. And if they're very tight, they can actually jerk the tool out of your hand. Had we been using what's now referred to as a spindle roughing gouge like this, this is just doomed to a catch. These tangs are so thin that when the tool grabs, if you're hanging on, that can actually break or bend. It's a dangerous tool, and it's not used here. That's why we refer to this as a spindle roughing gouge. Okay, face glasses are on, face shield. Let's write out the picture here for a second. I'm going to muffle the sound just a little bit here when I'm doing some of the work, but you'll be able to pick it up. Okay, so speed is on, low, we'll bring it up. And my first cuts are really worried about getting this edge squared off. And I want to cut these fibers from the side, this direction, or this direction, but not from the end of the fiber. So 45, 45, 45. Just little cuts to start. And I'm going to come out across this end here a little bit. Let me change hands, give you a better view. Now the wood's not turning really fast. So for me to cut more rapidly through here would require more pressure. I'm going to keep the tool against the wood and allow the wood to cut itself. Finish the cut. So now that edge is running true. It has no shape to it yet, but that's okay. So what we're going to now do is come around to the other face, and I'm going to true up this face. And with the tool running 45, 45, tool rest is now squared off, and I'm simply going to rest the bevel against the wood and lean backward. You can tell it's out around. The purpose for getting that face flat, because we're going to manipulate all of this, is my cuts are going to start coming from this face, this direction. And I want to not have the tool bouncing against that surface. Let me get the tailstock out of the way. We don't need it. And we're going to start our cuts. Again, back to our 45, 45, 45. And I'm going to begin to start pulling a small curve around this bowl. Make sure my tool rest is nice and tight. Since we're running true, I can pick up the speed just a little bit. I'm shaping a bowl. Now each cut goes just a little bit deeper. I go back farther this way, and I come around farther this direction. I've also opened up space here just that quickly. So I'm going to tighten up my tool rest. The other thing you need to recognize is I'm starting the cut with my weight straight down on my left foot. And when I finish the cut, I've rotated my body and my weight is over here on my left foot. So this curve is coming from the movement of me and not the tool. Let's do it again. One more cut. reached a spot where I'm out of balance and where I've reached the end of that cut. So I've got to move the tool rest, pick up the cut someplace in the middle, and bring it on around. I can continue to pull the tool through, but I want to stay in front of my work as much as I can, so I'm going to change to pushing the tool through. Cut's precisely the same, it's just that I'm on the other side of the tool, from here to here. Same cut. Okay, so we've got a rough shape, but we've got a long way to go. We have to create on this end a tenon, a way of grabbing this in the four-jaw chuck to allow me later to reverse to get to the inside. So I'm going to mark off two things here. Number one, I'm going to mark off how big the tenon needs to be, approximately 2 inches. So I'm going to guess it's right about there. And I'm going to decide how big the foot of this bowl is going to be. I'm going to make that about there. So now what I'm going to do is I need to get about 3/16 inch length here for the tenon. So I need to remove wood here. I'm going to go down and across, purpose of which is to simply remove some of this wood and create the mass that will become the tenon. Down and across. Down. Now, I haven't made the tenon, but I've identified where the tenon is going to be. And now what I'm going to do is identify where the foot is. I want this portion generally flat across here, so I'm going to just do a quick cut to flatten that out. So I'll put the foot mark back on here again. I know where it's going to be, but let's just make sure we all can see it. It was going to be about 40% of this diameter, so maybe someplace right around in there. So now that I've taken wood out, I've damaged the shape, or changed the shape, and I now need to pull my curve from here up to the rim and create the bowl there. Same cuts. Get my feet positioned. Readjust my position, and I'm going to push now instead of pull. just last very light cuts. We're more to get out little bumps, and I'll work on the bumps in a minute here, but let's come back and work on this tenon a little bit and create a good shape for that. Now the jaws of my chuck, which I'll show you in a couple of minutes, are straight and square. There are other chucks on the market that have a dovetail shaped jaw, so you'll modify this cut a little bit. So what I'm going to do is take my skew chisel, and I'm going to go straight in here to create this straight, and then I'm going to turn the skew chisel around and come across to create a flat on the bottom. Handle straight with the wave. Now, straight across. What I'm looking for in my tenon is this side to be perfectly straight this direction, and this corner down in here to be as sharp as it possibly can be. This will all be taken off later in the very cleanup at the end, and I need this part down here to be flat. This area here is not important because this will never touch the bottom of the chuck, and I'll show you that in just a couple seconds. So, I know the diameter I need, and I know the length of this, but if you do not, you'll need to take a measurement of your chuck jaws, transfer that to the bottom. You'll need to measure the depth of your jaw and make sure that the length of this tenon is not so deep that this touches the bottom of the jaw. The registration surface on this blank is here, not here. We'll do that with the chuck in just a couple seconds, but first I want to do is to clean this surface up as best I can. And I'm going to take the same gouge, same positions, but I'm going to do something entirely different. Instead of cutting with the edge of the tool, I'm going to turn the tool totally upside down. Drop the handle very low and use the back or bottom wing to scrape across this surface to take out all these little tiny ripples. This is called a shear cut or a shear scrape. Handles down. I want you to see I'm still getting shavings, but they're very small shavings. This is about cleaning up. I want the curve to be as smooth as I can get it. And without moving the tool rest, I can't finish this, so I have to adjust it over a little bit. Now we'll have an opportunity to sand this later, but I can reduce the amount of sanding. A lot. Now I don't like the way the top shapes out right at the moment. Very little, but I can fix that. And I did. Still getting very small shavings. Okay, so we've shaped the outside using one tool, the deep fluted gouge. We use the skew chisel to create the tenon. And now we're going to take this off of the faceplate, reverse it into the chuck, and by doing so, give us access to working on the other side. So I'll meet you back over at the bench, and we'll work on it over there. There's the other screw. Okay, we've got the faceplate off. This is going to be the inside of our bowl. And we have a tenon that's going to go into our 4-jaw chuck. Now let's talk about the 4-jaw chuck for a second. This chuck has 4 jaws that were manufactured like this and then cut into quarters. So the perfect hold is going to be a circle about that size. Now they open and close together. So let me show you what I mean by a good hold. If I put this piece in here and tighten these jaws down, you'll see that I've got a good grip all the way around this edge. But if I say, well, I'm sure about this project, I need a bigger tenon. I think the small one won't hold. Let's make a larger diameter tenon. Here's my example, for instance. So we make a bigger tenon and we put it in here. And I hope you can see from looking at the camera that this is only touching at 8 points. So my hold is not near as good as with a small tenon. Now, the small tenon is held in the chuck better, excuse me, but it may not be strong enough, in which case you may need a larger tenon. To take care of that, you simply remove the 4 jaws of the chuck and you insert a set of jaws that are wider. Instead of being here, perhaps they're out here, or even larger. Sets of chuck jaws cost not too much money, 30, 40 bucks, and can be changed in a minute or so. So here's my tenon. Well, let's do it upside down so you can see better what's going on. I'm going to put the chuck on top of the bowl. I don't have it tight, but the jaw is registering on the flat of the bottom. It does not reach the base in here. It's a little short of that. And the jaws close down to a place that actually they're inside the body of the chuck itself, which means they're fairly closed down. So with pressure down to be sure this is sitting snugly against this back. And then I'm going to tighten the chuck. There are 2 adjusting holes here, and I'm going to make sure that both of them are tight. What I'm doing is compressing that tenon by squeezing on it. Other brands of chuck has a dovetail shape, and you'd cut the shape of the tenon slightly differently. And as the jaws close, it bites into that dovetail more snugly. And as long as I can continue to tighten this, the serrated edges of these jaws are continuing to bite more deeply into that piece of maple. And that's about as far as that's going to go. So now I'll put this back on the lathe. Holding it very snugly here gives me complete access to this side. And since this has been smoothed up a little bit, I'll be able to use it as a reference in turning a matching interior shape. So let's go back to the lathe. Okay, we're back at the lathe, mounted in our chuck. Screwed on. Now we knew this face was not very square when we first started, so let's see quickly how square it's running now. Yeah, it's out of 1/64 of an inch. So we're going to have to true that back up just like we did the other side. Face shield on. 2 rests set here. I'm way above center line. That's much too high. With my tool down at 45, I want to be able to hit right at the center. And as I drop the handle, that raises the tip a little bit, so I've got to make a few adjustments here. That looks pretty good. So I'm just flatten the face off. Same pull cut. in the middle of that cut for a second. You saw me do that. I found that my left foot was not back far enough to allow me the body motion to start here in the center and finish up without falling off backwards. So I had to stop, readjust my feet. One foot in front, one foot back. So I transfer my weight, same situation. Now, here's something brand new. We're going to do what's called the three-part bowl cut. It's 3 different phases of hollowing this out. First phase is down into the wood. Second phase is coming around into a curve. And the third phase may be going just horizontally to remove wood. Now, a combination of those 3 together, down, around, and across, is a lot like rowing a boat. So my wrist is pronated. The tool is straight up and down. Let's give yourself a marker here. Straight up and down. And as I bring my hand forward to a more comfortable position, the tool goes from that position to 45 degrees. That means I have to roll my wrist over when I start to cut. And I get that rowing action. The last thing you need to know is the bevel edge right here. I'd like to line up with that outside edge of the bowl. Look where it puts my hand, way back behind the lathe. So I'm going to start my cut here, down, around until I get parallel with the ways. Tool has come up to 45 degrees. And then if I need to, holding this hand steady, I simply use my left hand to advance across the surface. So I'm going to start doing that by making little tiny bowl cuts in the center and working my way out. I'm not going to work on about going too deep. That's not my goal now. My goal is simply to work myself from here out to the edge with the tool horizontal. I'm continuing to check whether I'm at center, and I am now. So here we go. A little more speed. Wrist rotated, tool back. I had to drop my hand just a little bit to get to center, which means my tool rest is still not in the right position. To get up a little bit, that means the tool rest was just a bit low. Of course, I tightened it up real good. Well, now I start all over again. Tool, 45 degrees, level. That's where I need to be. Okay, here we go again. Another little bowl. Now there's a position of my left thumb. It was behind the tool, providing a fulcrum for it to pivot, also preventing it from sliding backwards. Out to the center. Now it's crossed. When I get down to the center, the wood's not moving very fast. Out here it may be going 40 miles an hour. Down here it's going maybe 1 or 2, so it's going to cut much more slowly. So I have to slow down as I work in towards the center. Down, around, across. Why having the tool straight up and down? It creates this groove. Now the tool has a place to ride. The back of the bevel is against that back shoulder. And that gives support here, and support here. And this is probably the weakest of the three supports because it's hanging out in midair. Let's do it, but not go too much deeper at the moment. Next thing, the tool is about this far away from the wood here. It's over twice that distance in there. And that's going to give me more bounce to my tool. So I'm going to bring my tool rest in a little bit to keep the distance between the support and the surface of the wood minimal. One more speed. That's the case where I used the third part of the cut 2 or 3 times to take off a little hump that I built up down there. I'm going to come out now. My goal is not to go any deeper, but my goal is to establish how thick this rim is going to be, and I want it less than half of that. You see, I'm not going all the way down, taking any more wood off here. I'm simply working on this one little area right there. So I'm going to come out maybe about half of that. Now, the goal now is to make the inside curve match the outside curve. And this is something that takes some time to get used to and to learn. So I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to look at the outside, and I'm going to try to estimate where I need to be turning, at least down about 1 inch. That's all I want to do is the first inch. And I can see from the outside it's almost vertical right here. And by feeling it's still getting thicker towards the bottom, so I don't need to take any more off the top, but now further down I do. So in pulling that curve, I engaged the bevel of the tool against the wood. I brought it forward until the edge caught. And I needed to go straight, so I just left the tool there while it went straight down. Now my feeling with my fingers is that's close. And I'm going to go down another 1/2, 3/4 of an inch, coming around here, and then I'm going to try to blend those two together. And then we'll check it with the real calipers in a second. You saw I have my hand on the back side. You may not want to do that, but it gives me a sense of support that allows my thumb to help guide this tool. And it's a little thick down here near the bottom, right at the moment. good. Still maybe a little thick down there, but now I'm going to just use part 3 of the bowl cut. Put my thing up so you can hear me. And basically just to take some mass out of here, just to get rid of a little bit of waste. The tool was still at 45 degrees. I tried to keep my hand level and simply was removing wood by sliding the tool horizontally across here. So let's set this aside. And now I'm down in a place where I want to come around a corner here and maybe clean up a little bit of this curve in here. That tool won't reach. So I'm going to go to a different tool, and that is the scraper. Now these work differently. If I put that scraper in there straight like that, with the handle relatively horizontal, there's a good possibility of me getting a small catch. So I'm going to raise the tool rest a little higher, because when I'm using the scraper, I want the handle always to be above the cutting edge in height. So I'm going to hold the tool with my arm over it, my thumb here to help drive it along. And first thing I'm going to do is kind of clean up this corner in here and then come around the corner and finish off the bottom. Thumb's pushing it across. Well, it's probably a good time to stop and see how our wall thickness is going. So let's get the calipers out. So there's my thickness at the rim. Still getting too thick down here. Might be easier to use it backwards. Right in there, I need to take off more. I know where to work. I know I got it in front of one of the cameras, but that's where I need to be. Still getting a little thick. Now that's going to be the bottom about there, so I don't want it a little thinner than that. But I can take some more out of this corner right here too. Learn to start trusting your fingers. I can tell what I wanted to show. Now, the high-pitched sound you heard is this rim vibrating against that tool. So I have to stabilize the wood somehow. My hand is one. Change the speed of the lathe, get off that resonance point, change the sharpness of the tool, change the amount of pressure I'm applying. Any one of those three may help. Now, I'm doing a lot of judgment by fingers, and it feels thick between here and here, and that's another shortcut. Those cuts are very, very light. I am barely holding onto the tool. Oh, that feels much, much better. There was a little spot in there that needed to be taken care of. So at this point, what I would do is to sand the interior and sand as much of this exterior as I can, which is right down to the edge of the foot, around the rim, through the whole inside, and get that all done. We'll take the tool rest out of the way, and we'll go to some sanding equipment and get that sanded. And since everybody's seen sanding before, I'm going to do all that off camera and then come back at this point as soon as the inside and outside are meeting my sanding criteria for this project. See you in a few minutes. I'm going to create a jam chuck. So I'm going to take the bowl out of the chuck. I can always find my registration because there's this mark on the bottom which I put on here before. And I'm going to put a piece of junk wood in here. And I'm going to turn it so all this garbage is gone. And this is going to become a jam chuck for our project. So I want a straight edge here, and I want this slightly dished out. I need to get rid of all this. Obviously this is another project earlier. I don't care about the face, I want this edge to be running true. That's all I care about. I don't need to be real sharp. I'm going to break it a little bit. And I know that this bottom here is below the center. And I'll take a little more off just because it looks better. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this bowl, put it here, but not that way. It needs a pad. And sandpaper works, wetsuit material works. I've got a piece of an old sock here that is going to work. Okay. Now I can't take all of that off, but I can take a lot of it off. And while I can do some of it with the bowl gouge, part of it's going to have to be done with the shallow fluted gouge. This edge was running true, so I don't want to go beyond that. So I'm going to cut towards the headstock. Remember, not cutting into those end grain fibers. I'm going to remove most of this tenon. My cuts going across the bottom are always very light, but most of the pressure is toward the headstock in that direction. Now I'm going to true up this edge here, and then I'm going to go to a different gouge. I'm going to finish this off with a shallow fluted gouge because I can get in tighter, and I can take smaller bites. So as I'm going in like this, I've got to be sure that my cuts are very light. Now obviously I'm not going to get this all off. but I'm going to get a lot of it off. As it gets smaller, it takes longer, so keep your cuts light, wait. Now at this point, on our first project, we're going to take a saw and cut that off and take a carving gouge and shape up the rest of the bottom. And we'll get back over to the bench in a couple minutes and conclude. See you soon. So here we are back at the bench with our bowl. It's been sanded to 220. The bottom I cut off and hand sanded. And no finish has been applied. It's a little different shape than the one I showed you earlier, but it was a different size piece of wood. So these things can take a nice finish, be used for all sorts of different purposes in the house or given away as gifts. Next week, we're not going to do it this way. We are going to use a screw chuck. Mount it between centers with a screw chuck. Another alternate way that's a very substantial way of holding a blank, specifically a dry wood blank, works really well that way. And we're going to do a shape, instead of just a simple bowl shape, we're going to do what's called an OG shape, which is a curve that comes up and at some point reverses into the opposite direction. And then I'm also going to show you on the next bowl alternate ways to holding this, places where we can grab this by the rim with a couple of different kinds of techniques to have full access to the bottom for cleanup. They work really well. Some of the things that you can buy are fairly inexpensive. Another set of chuck jaws, for instance, and another type of chuck which is called a Longworth chuck, which is a little bit more expensive but does the same job. So this is the conclusion of the first one. Get a piece of round dry wood, a faceplate to match your lathe, appropriate screws, get your face shield clean, get your deep fluted gouge sharp, and have some practice time. We'll see you in the next video.